Hello everybody and big welcome to a cEDH TV deck tech video with Shiver and Garrett with a Jeska and Tymna Mardu. What is this? As I understand, Shiver, you've built this.
This is a brew of mine that I've been working on for several years now. It's a little bit unconventional. Storm decks would go in cEDH. Different leverage in the land base. We've cut the lands like way low and changed the ramp package quite a bit and spread out the payout packages, especially within the mid-end, top end, to help facilitate more action throughout the pod compositions and being able to fight through different stacks and counter spell heavy decks as such. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different take than you might see from normal Ad Nauseam lists.
So taking this list with a little twist on it to the recent Mox Masters May, where I ended up winning the whole thing. I went, I believe, 5 wins and 2 losses, which, you know, the deck played beautifully. Really no complaints to it. I guess I can touch on the finals match since that's kind of what everyone wants to hear about. There's a lot of controversy, and then we can get into, I guess, the small tweaks and changes. So I was seat number 2. I was pretty stoked to play in the general. It was my first online tournament, so it's pretty big. I just kind of went in thinking I wasn't going to go very far, but I wanted to just play and have a lot of fun, which is, you know, that's magic for me. I'm not really playing to win the whole tournament. I just want to jam games and kind of have a creative outlet and play hard decks that are not very easy to pilot. I had a really good hand. Like my second 7 was a really good keep. I had I think 3 or 4 tutors, which kind of allows me to pivot the game however I want. You know, I don't really have like an exact game plan in mind. It's very just open-ended, and I can go and do whatever I want in that situation. But everyone else mulled pretty low. I think there was 2 4s and I think a 5 that was kept. So I really got to capitalize on this with Jeska being in the command zone, because there's 2 green decks playing big little dorks and the Rog Sai. So yeah, I think turn 1 they played some mana dorks and I nuked them turn 2 with Jeska and really set them back. And then just off of that, it's really a tempo game plan with this deck. I got to just continually capitalize and do Mardu stuff. It eventually came down to me continually just applying more and more pressure on this board state to a point where I think I had like 5 or 6 tutors that went off, which was extremely lucky. And I kind of abused the whole Goblin Welder, Goblin Engineer package, a defense grid in the bin, and just kind of showing that I have future protection coming up. I think before going to this turn where I ended up winning, I ended up using an Enlightened Tutor for Cloudstone Curio to put on top of my deck. So it was a big announcement like, hey, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to attempt to win here. So I go to my turn, E-tutored for this Cloudstone Curio, put it on top of the deck, and I was like, this is what's going to happen, guys. And so I go to my turn, and I believe I top decked a Diabolic Intent, which was just nuts because it's exactly what I needed. I had the defense grid in the yard, but I wanted like a more certain piece of protection. So I got the Grand Abolisher with the Diabolic Intent, which is just the most busted card in the game, I think. You land Grand Abolisher, you're winning. So I think in response to me tutoring, there was a Thrasios activation on the stack, which revealed... I could be saying a lot of this kind of like out of order. I don't know how people like go through matches and write all this stuff down and have like such a good recollection of like...
I have gotten a very good recollection of the game. It was a Mindbreak Trap that was revealed from the Thrasios activation.
Yeah, so exactly. So the Mindbreak Trap was revealed, and I figured the rest of the table really didn't have much just due to the nature of everyone mulling so low, and the game was kind of at a stop. So I didn't care too much if my Grand Abolisher ate the Mindbreak Trap, because I had a nice setup package with the Goblin Engineer, Cloudstone on the field. So in my mind, if Grand Abolisher eats the interaction, I still have 1 away to loop, because I don't think that they had any interaction at that point. And Mindbreak Trap's the scariest thing, because if my Dockside gets hit, which is the combo I'm going to set up with the Cloudstone Dockside, if that gets hit by a Mindbreak Trap, it's exiled. So I have to completely pivot to a new game plan. So the Grand Abolisher was somewhat of bait, but at the same time, if it lands, I just win. So it was my way to assess the board. This whole dilemma kind of unfolds. They want to force Freedom Waffle, the player under me, seat 3, to use the Mindbreak Trap. But following him is, I believe his name is Pingmeister. He was on Kinnan, and he had a Thrasios on board, and I believe just 4 mana to be able to activate. And so kind of the argument was that they wanted Freedom Waffle to abuse or to use the Mind Break Trap on the Grand Abolisher, and nobody else wanted to really do anything to interact. I've talked to Freedom Waffle a bit, but from that point of view, it kind of went to show me that either they were going to try and attempt wins on their turn, and they wanted him to use his only piece of interaction to stop me from winning, or they were just kind of, I don't know, dirtling. Like I don't think they had anything, but it's this whole this whole priority bowling thing is very weird to me.
I think I got an information, I might be wrong, but I think they had something. I talked, it doesn't really big matter. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, so the rumor is that Pingmeister had like a Force of Will, a Resculpt, and some other blue card to be able to Force of Will and have the Resculpt. But Mind Break Trap is the best card in this scenario to hit my dockside, and it doesn't really do anything to Grand Abolisher. So in my opinion, on this whole priority bowling thing, which it wasn't really even priority bowling, it was kind of just stubbornness and like lack of wanting to communicate with the other players at the table and like, hey, this is really what I have, this is the scenario that we can present. Pingmeister didn't want to communicate at all. He's just like, I can deal with something potentially, but I'm not going to use it. You need to use the Mind Break Trap. So Freedom Waffle is getting a lot of like hate for this whole priority bowling thing, and he didn't priority bully anyone. He just wanted the table to communicate very openly about like what the possible situation, how it could go. So I'm just meanwhile sitting there like Grand Abolisher's on the stack. I'm like, what are you guys gonna do? You know, like it kind of sucked. That's in my opinion how the situation unfolded. It was two blue players kind of bickering about what potential interaction they had, and Mardu just slicing through and taking the W, no problem.
Oh, hallelujah. Like, it's so good.
You could summarize it by saying that cEDH is currently kind of greedy. No one wants to interact.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of, I've gone through a lot of different like archetypes and playing different styles of decks and different colors within the cEDH format. And I really started with Rakdos, and I played Rakdos for a good year. And then I came across Shiver's database list for Tymna Jeska like 2 years ago maybe. I started jamming that a lot, and I played Mardu for a good year. That's all I played. I was like a devout like Mardu player. I was completely sold. And you kind of go through these phases where like I kind of need to learn a little bit more about different archetypes and decks, and so I went through these like tangents of like playing Naya and then getting into blue. And through all these phases, I kind of realized blue is it's a whole other conversation, but blue is very what feels like lackluster to me. It's very trading. Like, you want to force a will something, you're losing 2 cards to interact with one person's potential win, and a lot of the times interacting with that win doesn't even stop them. It puts it into the bin, which allows like further reanimation or just setting up different lines. So in my opinion, Mardu has some of the strongest abilities to like pivot with lines and just kind of carve through any type of interaction possible.
Speaking of that, Shiver, so you didn't include Ad Nauseam inside this deck.
I did, and it's still in my list. But it's funny you mentioned that because the night before Gary played in the tournament, there was like maybe the night or 2 nights before he was messaging me on Discord, and he was like, "Hey man, we also had I should probably preface, we had a discussion in the Tymna Jeska server about cutting Ad Nauseam. This list, fondly called the Chapel of Chernobyl, kind of centers itself around Bolas' Citadel. So there's a lot of different ways to cheat it in, and it's very accessible. And because it's so accessible, Ad Nauseam, like the deck has kind of pivoted away from being a turbo Ad Nauseam deck, and has really turned itself into like a diverse storm engine deck. So like Ad Nauseam, which used to be kind of the plan A, is really like plan B or C or even D most of the time. So Gary was saying like, hey, I'm really digging like playing with, I think you were playing with Villas primarily in the beginning, which is great. And I think it's a card that if you're playing Reanimate in your deck, it's kind of like a free include most of the time, but just like if you have Reanimate and Entomb in your list, like Villas is quite an easy include, and if your deck is built correctly, it can completely blow up your turn. I think him and another person in our server were talking about porting Brewlord and the Saw and Half lines, and then I think Gary was like, hey, what do you think about cutting Naws? I'm like, well, man, I think that you should do whatever you feel will make you most comfortable in the tournament. and what you're most excited about. If you're really excited about something, you're guaranteed to perform better. And lo and behold,
Yeah.
you got a tournament win on your belt, like literally after changing it. So like Gary's list, I think is about 9 cards different. Yeah, I think it's about 9 cards. And a lot of the swaps that he made are very functional. Like I think he swapped like Even Mind Sensor for Touch the Spirit Realm and stuff like Cursed Mirror, which is a copy artifact spell. It's an artifact that copies creatures, and I think he switched that for Saw in Half. And then some of the engines like Necropotence and Bergi for Hoarding Broodlord and Villis, and I think like Ad Nauseam for Peer into the Abyss. So ultimately, like what you're really seeing is that this idea that Ad Nauseam is the premier, combo engine or storm engine or whatever you want to call it, cEDH might not be exactly true, and we've people have been hinting on that and you can clearly see, if you partition the slots and especially the top end of your payouts correctly, you get this like very broad and diverse range of options that you can choose from for different situations. So if you want to go towards Reanimator, that can dodge different stack interactions, or if you want to go for like a Magda plan, like Magda combined with Dockside into Hoarding Broodlord is an extremely powerful play pattern. You get all kinds of crazy stuff in there, and eye-opening to me too, where it's like a thought I've thought of many times of, what if I just cut Nas? And Gary did it, and boom, it worked. So, yeah.
I mean, like having multiple options of different combos is sometimes okay. Like they all kind of synergize together with each other in different kinds of ways, so to say. Like you can reanimate Villis, and you can reanimate the Hoarding Broodlord, so to say.
But I played a lot of Kalia before I started playing the Tymna Jeska. And so, I mean, you played Bad Dog's Kalia list on one of your recent CD. Yeah, so kind of bouncing off Bad Dog and Shiver a lot. They're like the kings of Mardu, in my opinion. So I know Shiver doesn't like to be like held up super high like that, but they're very, very humble and very, very intelligent individuals.
So what differs this Jeska Tymna with Kalia, for example? What's the difference between those two options?
That's a really good question. Kalia, in my opinion, is one of the craziest decks that you can possibly play against. The problem, I think, with Mardu is they're not so straightforward. The game plan isn't very linear. Like, your combos that you want to play out. It's a lot more complex than that because you really have to navigate what the board.
I actually have a really good answer to that. So I was sitting and discussing something with a person that was building a Golgari deck, and he figured out that he could resolve a Hoarding Broodlord together with a Saw in Half combo, so to say. Clean and simple. And from there he would do a Peer into the Abyss. Yay! But then what? And he was sitting and trying to figure out what he was going to do with the Peer into the Abyss. And he was adding cards to like complete something. And what he was actually trying to do is writing a primer that was easy to read, easy to follow, and easy to execute. And I was trying to convince him and saying, abandon all those IDs. Once your Peer into the Abyss resolves, you will figure it out. Once you've drawn your half of your deck, you will figure something out. For example, I have a Rakdos Tibalt deck that wins with Unwell Breach and Praetor's Grasp. That's it. I use Praetor's Grasp to steal my wins from my opponents and win that way.
Yeah, that's a very unconventional kind of, I don't want to say look down upon idea, but it kind of is. Like someone high-end cEDH kind of community, like video makers, whatever, will look at that and say, this list sucks. But it actually, I feel like, opens you up to a lot more potential gameplay options. So,
I agree, because like what you're doing is you're removing finishers and increasing outlets. For example, I've seen decks that are on blue but not on black that can achieve infinite mana and infinite card draw, and then they add Fastest Oracle as the finisher for that infinite mana. But you don't need Fastest Oracle there. If you've achieved infinite mana, infinite card draw, you have the win already. Just figure something out. So I really like the part where you're saying Mardu is very complicated. You don't have a straight line. You don't do this. You kind of build something together with what you have and what you get, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of going back towards like why I made these changes is like I played a lot of Kalia, and I realized how strong being able to just cheat a Villis in, or a Broodlord or a Razakath, or something completely busted it's just more my playstyle. It's not like, you know, we see these like database lists and we're like, oh, this is like, we have to include necropotence, we have to include Ad Nauseam, we have to include all these like staple cards. Kind of going off of that, like Shiver's Bad Dogs like Collie list already kind of break the meta and break the stereotypical rules. Like they might include these like staple cards in some instances, but they're breaking a lot of like these deck building rules in cEDH. And it kind of goes to show that like you don't need deck building rules. Like you need to understand like how the game's played, how to read the board, and how to actually efficiently pilot your deck. For me personally, I like Villas. It's one of the most busted cards in the format. So I started with Villas originally, and then, you know, I played with Raza, I played with like other types of ideas, and then I realized how strong the Broodlord was, the amount of options that it opens up in Tymna Jeska outside of even just peering to the abyss, like assembling Cloudstone Dockside loops with it, assembling breach lines with it. Like there's unlimited things that you can do with it. It's stupid. I can't believe they printed the card, but I'm very, very happy they did. Ad Nauseam is a really, really good card, especially when you have an extremely low average CMC. You know, it's like you look at like playing Rogsci, for example, and like your CMC is like 1.2. I think in my list, I'm closer to like, I think I'm close to like 1.5 or something.
Hordling Broodlord, Peer into the Abyss, Bolas Citadel, Villas, and
World Gorger Dragon.
And World Gorger Dragon. Free.
Lots of three.
There's
like 14 threes, I think.
And a Smoldering Titan 4 as well. So going over a few cards you have here. You have Final Fortune, but you don't have Necro Potence in your deck.
I mean, Final Fortune 1, I think it's one of the I don't think it was in the tournament. Sorry, all my games kind of blend together, but there's so many scenarios where Final Fortune is just a lifesaver of a card. Being able to just steal the next turn coming up, right? Someone passes, you have the win, but you needed like one extra mana, or someone interacted and kind of screwed you over before you could go off. There's so many scenarios where I've end step on someone else's end step. Yeah, exactly. Someone else's end step and just cast Final Fortune, took it to my turn, and say I had Ranger Captain on board or something, and you can just win. You know, it's an extremely good timed card. Typically after heavy interaction suite and you're sitting on the win, or you're sitting on a good setup, pretty, I'd say, invaluable. I think it's an auto include. I don't see why I wouldn't run it even outside of Necro.
You're playing Dragon's Rage Channeler. I guess it's for Tymna and just a breach.
It's a little bit for Tymna, but there's you know, a few different reasons why. Like stuff like Dragon's Rage Channeler and Ragavan, and you know, obviously Esper Sentinel, some of the vampires like Insolent Neonate and Voldaren Epicure, all these little one drops. What they are doing is helping keep the deck move along. Because you're on such a low land count, I think in these lists we're running 23, you need to be able to accelerate the cards through your deck and build momentum so that you can keep hitting your lands. Like, it's very easy, especially like when you get your Tymna out, it becomes almost stupid easy. But it's very easy to just, you know, play something like Esper or play something like Darcy and quickly see, you know, 2 to 3 cards and be able to have the selection that you need in order to either hit another land drop or not even lands, but like mana sources, just so you can keep up with mana with the rest of the table.
I mean, you're even playing Memnite.
Yeah, Memnite is probably one of my favorite cards in the list, to be honest. The utility, you'll find that each card has like multiple purposes. Like there's not just like, oh, it's a 0-drop artifact. One, like it enables turn 2 Tymna draw, right? If you land Memnite turn 1, you have a 1/1 that can get in and swing. It can also be potted, right? So we have Oswald, we have the utility of, the ceiling is very high for just about every card.
People have given me crap for playing Memnite for years now, but I just wear it like a badge of honor now.
I mean, it's always great when you have a Tymna.
Yeah. If you get like a turn 1 Tymna and Memnite, it's huge. It's a grinding station piece that gets through like Mystic Remora, which is like a really big deal. You know, a welder piece that's really hard to counter. Like an Oswald thing that you can pot into like an Esper Sentinel or a Mana Vault or something. So it's a weird card.
Deafening Silence with Grinding Station, like.
Right, exactly.
That is a decent ritual. That is a good ritual. Mm-hmm. It's like a Ragavan, similar.
Kind of, yeah.
Lightning Axe, though. These 5 damage to target creature. I guess you're using this to discard cards.
Yeah, this is, I think
Absolutely.
Shiver said one of his favorite cards.
All right, the story behind this one was in my Chinese play group. I used to play Bolt. I was like a huge Lightning Bolt fanatic, and I just loved bolting stuff. It's great because I liked it over Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile because you could bolt your own dockside and reanimate it to get like a huge ritual effect or whatever. But eventually, my play group started getting much heavier creature-wise, and especially like one of the guys was playing the mono white Helia that can like pump up their creatures, right? So they started getting like everything out of bolt range. So I just like one day I was like, well, let's try this thing out. It was just like a meme. But yeah, like dealing 5 damage to anything is great. Then you started seeing the synergy throwing a World Gorge, like killing a Drannith Magistrate and throwing a World Gorger into the graveyard so that you can combo off. It's a beautiful thing. Really great aspects of Lightning Axe that kind of came up with the Welder package was Lightning Axe, you discard the card as a part of the cost. So while the spell's on the stack, the card that you discarded is already in the graveyard. So like opposed to a card like Faithless Looting, so you have your Welder out, you play Faithless Looting, they can respond by killing the Welder. But if you Lightning Axe the Bolas' Citadel into the graveyard, there's no chance for them to interact, and you can weld the Bolas' Citadel in before they have a chance to kill it. I always tell like the new people who are playing it to just come into it with open eyes, like eyes wide open. Just don't have any of your past experiences muddle what could like a new learning experience. Because if you come into the deck just like with like medium expectations and just kind of don't think about it as like I need a mulligan for Ad Nauseam or I need a mulligan for Bolas' Citadel. And it's not really so much that. It's more like find a hand that works. You know, like if you got a couple lands and a Tymna, okay, that's cool. Take it. Look for hands that have a game plan or something that's going to be able to deal with the different pod composition. If you have like a couple counterspell decks, maybe an Oswald hand's pretty. Or don't go into it like thinking that you have to have a specific game plan. It's very open-ended. It's a puzzle. You got to figure it out.
You're basically playing very adaptive.
Right.
When is this deck bad? Like, it gotta have some bad matchups? Like, what are decks you don't want to see across your table?
Probably. Have you guys played against the Turbo Stacks Rog to Vesh deck?
Yes.
Yeah, that deck's nasty. I haven't ran into too many scenarios yet, but I don't have as much experience as Shiver does with this list. The hardest part in Commander is like a 4-person format and other people not kind of understanding like points of interaction. So I'd say my biggest gripe is blue players kind of throwing counter magic at stuff they don't really understand and then giving the game to someone else. That's probably the hardest part about playing decks like this is you kind of just lose to lack of knowledge from other players.
Yeah, I would agree. Some of the harder matchups are like green-white stacks cores that just only like they just like specifically are just trying to slow the game down as possible as much as possible. Like one of those at the table is probably fine. There's enough removal in the deck where you can kind of deal with everything. When it becomes a little bit more difficult is if you have another stacks deck. So let's say you have like a green-white Rule of Law, Collector Roof, all that kind of stuff, and then you have another deck that maybe has more tax effects, like or like artifact stacks like Torpor Orb, Grafdigger's Cage, Thorn of Amethyst. When you get all that kind of like put into in the same room, it can get a little bit hard, and that's one of the things that you were asking about, like the difference between Kalia and Tymna Jeska, and that's one spot where I think like Kalia kind of beats us on is that they have that Kalia plan that can kind of go over everything.
Well, Gareth and Shiver, thank you for coming here and sharing your knowledge about your deck. And once again, even though it was a little bit controversial and even though a lot of people are saying that it was stubborn and misplaced, I still think you won the game. Congratulations to that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mons.
I wanted to say something on that is like I know that all that stuff happened, but at the end of the day, like I really don't think it should take away from the victory that Gary had. I think it was great. This has kind of been like for me personally, like a long arc of, starting with this brew and seeing it kind of unfold, and Gary kind of put the period at the end of the sentence there by kind of showing that this deck can compete at a table. But at the end of the day, the thing that I'm most excited about and happiest about is that, Gary took it all in the end, because the dude's a really positive guy. He's been a great person to talk to on the internet. I'm like all alone here in China, so when people reach out, it feels, you know, really heartening to have a conversation with people. So yeah, I'm super proud of what he's done, and really happy for him. And he's going to be a father soon.
Whoa! Congrats! Congrats!
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I got less than a month.
It's happening soon then.
Yeah. But yeah, I just I appreciate Shiver and Bad Dog and all the kind of guidance that I've gotten. So we have a Tymna Jeska Discord that has a lot of good conversations about just brewing, not even personally related to Tymna Jeska, but just good ideas and good people and conversations always kind of taking place.
And you can find both Shiver's and Garrett's deck list in the description below of the video, as well as a link